Serious. People who killed in self-defense, what's your story? Shared this before, but I was staying with my grandfather while my parents were out of state and I woke up to a noise coming from upstairs, main floor. I was in the basement, and just knew it wasn't my grandfather. He has hearing damage from Vietnam and it didn't wake him up, but there was banging around and heavy footsteps. I was in the room with the gun cabinet, so I grabbed a shotgun and went to check it out. When I got to the top of the stairs I just saw a guy in the living room going through stuff, so I pressed the safety and said he needed to leave. He turned around and saw my unthreatening scared as shit 14-year-old self and told me to just go back downstairs and mind my business, so I repeated myself. He turned around and started walking towards me with something in his hand. So I fired. At this point my grandpa is very awake and comes out of his room and just tells me to look away and call the police. Thankfully, due to all the factors of him being a repeat offender, having a weapon, my age, and castle laws, it didn't go any further than the police coming and asking me questions. It messed me up for a while, and I still think about it often. But I got over it and realized that as unfortunate as it was, I didn't have a whole lot of options at that point. I want to comment on this to get it off my chest since I don't have opportunities to talk about this with my friends since I'm scared of what they will think. I was born in Honduras, I live in the US now. And from what I remember, it was a very deserted place. I spent most of my time with my walking to this girl's house who was around 16 years old. A couple other kids would come to her house since education was hardly accessible. She would teach us our shapes, animals, colors act. After class was over I went home and I heard my aunt scream from the kitchen, "Ayuda, Ayuda." And then I remember that my uncle kept a gun hidden covered in rocks beside old bathtub outside. That's where we bathed. He knew how dangerous it could be in this area, so he prepared me for everything. Went around the back and grabbed it as fast as I could. I went in and there stood a man with a knife threatening my aunt. I didn't really grasp what was happening, but I shot him without any second guesses like I was taught by my uncle. I honestly still don't believe I did something like that to this day, and I don't know what would have happened to my aunt if I didn't get there sooner. I still don't feel comfortable talking about this to my friends, but I just want to get it off my chest. Sorry for any grammar mistakes. English isn't my first language. I was 12, the oldest of 3 brothers. We were home alone while my parents were out on date night. At maybe 10 p.m. we hear a loud banging at the front door before a man broke the lock with his sheer body weight and momentum. I told my brothers to hide in my room while I went to my parents' room for their shotgun. The whole time this guy is yelling about where are my keys, and he starts coming upstairs when he heard me fumbling as I tried to load a shotgun. He flung the door to my parents' room open and I fell back with the gun shaking in my hands. I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger twice. The first one caught him in the legs and the recoil made the second shot catch his entire torso. The poor man had been drunk and lived a few houses down the way, but I didn't learn that until after. All I could focus on was how he was begging his mother, she wasn't there, not to let him die, and that he was sorry he let her down as he slowly died on the floor just feet away from me. When I was 13, I was babysitting my younger brother. Parents were out having a dinner date. At the time my family lived on a dirt road, away from the city. Quiet place. So my parents didn't think much of leaving me alone with my 9-year-old little brother for an hour or two. I was putting him to bed when I heard a knock on the door. This knock was loud and he banged several times before stopping for a moment. Then I heard glass shatter. I immediately grabbed my .22 long rifle my parents got for me, and hid in my little brother's room behind his bed with rifle mounted at the door. Told him to hide under the bed and make no noise whatsoever no matter what happens. I had forgotten about my cell phone on the kitchen table halfway across the house. I remember thinking to myself to protect my little brother at any cost. I heard a lot of noises coming from inside my house. First in the kitchen, then living room, then my room. Then finally the hallway to my little brother's room. As the door opened I seen an unfamiliar guy. He quickly seen me, then rushed me. As there was a good 5-10 steps from the door to my brother's bed, I fired all the rounds in my rifle, 5 rounds if anyone is wondering. I just remember him dropping on the floor with a loud thud, my brother crying, and a lot of blood. I called my parents, after which they called the police. After talking with my parents, they told me the police said that the guy was our next door neighbor and a registered sex offender, most likely was staking out the house, and he noticed we were home but our parents weren't. Honestly, it hasn't affected me as an adult. I did what had to be done, and I don't regret anything. Needless to say, any future dinner dates my parents had back then, they brought us along, which was nice. Worked for an armed messenger service. Those guys that drop off cash and pick up deposits from banks, businesses in the armored trucks. Not even 10 a.m. and as I was opening the door to the truck, I saw a huge guy, I'm not tiny, over 6 feet and well proportioned, in the mirror. Meant just for this thing, get out of the car and run towards me. He put me in a chokehold and started grabbing for my gun. He manhandled me like I weighed nothing, would have easily gotten the gun if it wasn't a L3 holster. I managed to draw it, press it against him and started pulling the trigger before I blacked out. I have no idea what he would have done if he got the gun, and I'm not used to just being tossed around like that. He turned out to be blind drunk and played for a college football team. I've shared this before, not sure if it was accidental, but while in college in my first apartment, I came home from work at 3 a.m. Some dude was in the hallway outside my door, and I had a bad feeling about it. I paused and went to get the mail, hoping he would leave. Nope. I come back and he is waiting at my door. I asked him what was up, and he said he was looking for John. My name is not John, and I lived alone. I asked him to move and let me in my door. He told me to fuck off and get John. I slid between him and the door, opened it, and he pushed his way in. I pushed him out. He took a swing at me. I swung back, hitting him in the eye, which caused him to fall back and hit his head. Out cold. Forever. Apparently John was the guy who lived in the apartment before me. The dead guy spent 5 years in jail because of John ratting him out for drugs. Dead guy came to get some revenge. Got dead instead. I woke up one night to my dog barking, which he never does, so I grabbed my pistol and went to check it out. When I looked out the front door, I could see some motion by my truck and I heard some pounding. I opened the door and sidestepped to where I could see down my driveway, and I saw someone punching my truck. Never seen him in my life, so I asked what he was doing. Edit, I fully expected him to turn and run once he saw me, like any normal person of sound mind would do. He stopped and turned to me huffing and puffing and started saying things like she's a liar and such, and I asked where he thought he was. He told me, and it was a street like 3 blocks away. I proceeded to tell him he was at the wrong house and that he needed to leave, but he refused and said he was at the right place, and then proceeded to approach me. I raised my gun and pointed it at his chest. I had been holding it in both hands pointed at the ground directly in front of me the whole time, and told him he needed to leave and that he was at the wrong house. He didn't listen. He kept coming toward me, repeating what he said about someone being a liar. I told him again that he needed to leave, and he then told me he was invincible, which with the way he was talking and acting plus that told me he was high as a kite. As he was approaching, I was gradually backing up to my front door. I wanted to be between him and the entry to my house with my wife inside, and eventually was backed up directly to it. He eventually got within arm's reach of my gun and made a swipe for it, so I jerked it back and then pushed back out and fired a shot right in the center of his chest. He didn't flinch, he didn't grimace, or anything to show that he was just shot. He then started coming at me again and I proceeded to shoot him till he dropped. 6 shots total. I originally thought it was 3 until the police told me otherwise, all in the center of his chest. He moved a little and then stopped. After making sure he wasn't getting up, and I went inside, quickly told my wife I was okay, and called the cops and put on shorts. I was in my underwear, As I went back outside, the cops showed up about 5 minutes later. I had put my gun down inside before, so I told him I was unarmed with my arms out and told him where the guy was. He detained me, and after about 6 hours and a couple interviews at the PD, I was released with 0 charges against me. Definitely not a fun night. I was in shorts the whole time and the PD was freezing cold. I couldn't even talk to my wife and make sure she knew I was okay or even tell her what happened. I could hear the dude's girlfriend, who was later taken to the hospital for injuries he gave her before he came to my house, crying in another room before I asked to be moved. Edits: the guy turned out to be on triple C's. Orcaricide in HBP cough and cold. An over-the-counter cough medicine. 1. I didn't call the cops because I had no idea what it was. I had checked out noises dozens of times that turned out to be animals or branches or other random innocent things, so why did I have a reason to believe this was different? 2. I was literally backed into a corner and opening the door to go inside would have opened the opportunity for him to get inside to my family, but I chose to maintain the barrier between them since I knew he thought he was at his girlfriend's house, or whoever she was. I was very certain he was high, and I had no idea what he would do if he got my gun or even got inside. 3. In the military, I'm a veteran, and I'm pretty sure police, they teach that someone trying to grab your gun is considered lethal force. So going off my prior teachings, that is why I shot him. I firmly believed he would take it and try and use it on me. Plus I only shot again once I knew he was still trying to attack me. One night I was walking home, pretty late, like 2 a.m. in the morning. I was 16 at that time and I happened to pass a bar. One drunk old dude said, "Hey, come here and buy me a beer." I started to walk faster and pretend I didn't hear him. Right after that he jumps on my back, trying to choke me. Managed to fall hard on my back. He was still piggy riding me. Unfortunately when we fell he hit his head on the curb.